Now, a coalition between the Democratic Alliance and the Freedom Front Plus in the municipalities of Langeberg and Oudtshoorn. This is in the Western Cape. Those have collapsed. At least that's what we know so far. The Freedom Front Plus is being accused of breaching a coalition agreement after it refused to support a budget. This was a few months ago. This is in respect of the Langeberg municipality. Now, the DA, on the other hand, is being accused of arrogance by failing to replace the mayor of Oudtshoorn, and that's why that municipality is in trouble. Freedom Front Plus Western Cape leader is Dr. Corne Mulder, who joins us, and the Democratic Alliance provincial head is Jaco Londt. To both of you, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Can I start with you, Dr. Mulder? When you hear the statement that says the Freedom Front Plus and the ANC are working together to remove the Democratic Alliance from municipalities in the Western Cape, is that statement factually correct?
No, it's a blatant lie. Unfortunately, it's a blatant lie. And we had a meeting on Wednesday, and I informed Ms. Zille from the Democratic Alliance that it's absolutely nonsense. But it seems to be a strategy that the Democratic Alliance wants to push, but it's not true, no.
Mr. Londt, when you hear those reassuring words, does that give you hope that there is no breakdown in trust between the DA and the Freedom Front Plus?
Well, good evening, Paulie, and all the listeners. I do think we just need to look a little bit broader. The Western Cape, there's 30 local municipalities. There are 7 where the DA is in opposition, 10 where we are in coalition, and 13 in an outright majority. But Mr. Mulder used the word, it's a blatant lie. But the fact of the matter is the Freedom Front, before the election, already voted with the ANC to remove a DA mayor in Cape Agulhas. The ANC and the Freedom Front voted together to remove Chris McPherson, not on principles or anything that they say, on a personality clash that we offered to mediate, and they denied it. We have voice recordings of the Freedom Front deputy leader in the Western Cape lobbying smaller parties to get rid of the DA mayor in George. So the Freedom Front is obviously very economical with the truth if they are selective in saying that they are a trustworthy coalition partner, because they are anything but a trustworthy coalition partner.
Dr. Mulder, when you hear that kind of statement, does that fill you with confidence that this coalition agreement is on safe ground?
No, it's very concerning that the Democratic Alliance would say these things. I really don't understand why they would do this. I can respond to each and every one of these allegations. Maybe I should start with Cape Agulhas. What is not being said to the viewers out there is that there was a disciplinary hearing against the mayor in Cape Agulhas by an outside panel, and that panel unanimously found the mayor guilty of misconduct. Now, does the DA Freedom Front Plus to try and sweep the carpet? We are not prepared to do that. The rubber stamp of the Democratic Alliance, ethical thing, and that mayor was removed. Obviously, the Democratic Alliance reacted to it by promoting that person to Parliament. That is how the DA unfortunately operates. No, the Freedom Front Plus is serious about coalitions, but I think there's an underlying problem here, and I understand why. The Democratic Alliance has been used to govern quite for a long time alone, all by themselves. But as was correctly pointed out, they lost clear majorities in 11 municipalities in the Western Cape, and we entered into coalition agreements with them, and we are a committed coalition partner, and we are serious about that. There's a reason why people refer to the Freedom Front Plus as the adult in the room. So we continue with that, but to our surprise, suddenly the Democratic Alliance ended the coalition in George, then in the Garden Route District Council. We've then had a meeting with the leadership of the DA in the Western Cape in Mossel Bay, in which we explained to them, not only the Freedom Front Plus, in the Oudtshoorn coalition, there were 4 parties, so 3 other parties explained to the Democratic Alliance that there's a huge problem with their current mayor, Mr. McPherson. We asked them, please give us somebody else from the Democratic Alliance and we will support that person because we want to retain and remain part of that coalition. The Democratic Alliance was not prepared to do so, so a motion of no confidence succeeded. And then we invited the Democratic Alliance once again to form a government. They declined. Then we put out an invitation to all the parties in Oudtshoorn to form a government of local unity. Once again, the DA declined, and then we formed a government of local unity, which now is the government in Oudtshoorn. And I think that is the way to go. We were quite surprised when in Langeberg last Wednesday, suddenly we were accused of betraying the trust of the Democratic Alliance, and I'll come back to that just now.
Mr. Londt, I want to come back to you, and I don't know if I'll be forcing you to admit something that you still think is salvageable, but when I listen to you and I listen to Dr. Mulder, he appears to say the agreement is still intact, whereas your wording or your commentary appears, on the other hand, as saying this is as good as gone, this agreement. Can we hear from you, in the clearest sense possible, whether this coalition agreement between the DA and Freedom Front Plus still exists?
So, Corne, if you would allow me, I want to just touch it on a little bit bigger scale.
Yeah.
I mean, there's without a doubt, and it's independently proven, that where the DA governs, it is a better run government. Even now, in the government of national unity, some of our ministers have really stepped up and shown what the difference is, where you have competent people heading up departments, governments, etc. And that is what we do. We go through a rigorous process to choose the best possible people to lead us in governments or in departments, like we now do in the government of national unity. If we come to Oudtshoorn, what the Freedom Front basically did is they came to us and say, we'll work with you, but not with your mayor. The Freedom Front only has one single ward councillor in the entire Western Cape. But the Freedom Front will run for the hills if we say, what you are doing now, let's turn it around and we say, your ward councillor, Mr. Alders, is a problem. Let's fight a by-election in that ward and let the voters choose. They will not do that. They will not tolerate that we dictate to them who their candidate should be. But the sad thing is, it is the voters of these municipalities where we have worked relatively well with the ANC. Obviously, there's going to be problems. And those problems we resolve as best as possible. And we offered that to the Freedom Front in Oudtshoorn, and they were selective now in their arguments. It's quite interesting that Dr. Mulder responded to everything, but he did not respond to a voice note where his deputy leader in the Western Cape was lobbying smaller parties to get rid of the DA mayor. But let us not fool one another. This is the start of the Freedom Front 2026 campaign. They barely got enough votes to get a seat in the provincial legislature on the remainder. They lost over 11% of their votes in this province by aligning themselves with a Cape exit under the leadership of Dr. Mulder, which backfired spectacularly. If you compare the most recent two elections, the Freedom Front lost they went from 3%, almost 3% in 2019 to under 1.5% in this election under Dr. Mulder's leadership. If you compare the previous local government election to this one, they lost half of their support. Now, the saying goes, the best form of defense is attack. And this is what Mr. Mulder and the Western Cape Freedom Front is doing by attacking the best run governments in South Africa for their own selfish gain. We do not want these coalitions to fail. We want it to be successful. We want the Freedom Front, the Western Cape Freedom Front, and Mr. Mulder to come to the table and say, let's remove the personalities. Let's go back to the agreements that we had. But let's not dictate to one another who should be heading that up, because they will not tolerate that. They will not stand for it.
Yeah.
And they cannot then dictate to us when we have proven records of choosing our people through rigorous systems.
Okay.
And they have a proven track record of running governments.
All right. I see Dr. Mulder is shaking his head vigorously.
Yes.
Before I come to you, Dr. Mulder, Let me stay with Mr. Londt for just a moment longer. If indeed the Freedom Front Plus does cooperate with, among others, the African National Congress in these municipalities, what is your biggest fear as a Democratic Alliance?
It is the Freedom Front's choice to work with the African National Congress. And that is the choice they have now exercised in Oudtshoorn. But it's also a fact that the African National Congress has run this country into the ground. And I've heard Mr. Mulder in the past trying to compare the government of national unity to governments of local unity, which is actually a pathetic argument. Nationally, there was the choice between Mkhonto we Sizwe and the EFF and an alternative. In the Western Cape, the Freedom Front has a choice between a party that has a proven track record in delivering the best governments and the ANC. And they choose to go to the ANC because they are failing miserably in the Western Cape. The results are showing it, and it's showing under the leadership of Mr. Mulder. And that is why he's doing this attack on the DA instead of fixing his own house, working together. And when he works together, we will both reap the rewards of doing effective governments. But now we have 8 municipalities that are at risk because Mr. Mulder...
Dr. Mulder, let's allow him to conclude. Let's allow him to conclude.
Yes.
No, he can go. Boy, I'll get my chance again. But that we are failing. We are risking 8 other municipalities by going this route.
All right.
And we must ask ourselves if that's the best route for the Western Cape. And our clear and unequivocal answer is no, it's not. We need stable governments, and we need to continue delivering the services that the Western Cape residents are used to.
Dr. Mulder,
yes,
it's your turn.
Mr. Londt has now spoken for a long, long time. Now, you'll know there's one of the things that have been said about the Democratic Alliance, and it's called arrogance. And that's a very, very nasty kind of concept, arrogance. And we've just heard that. We've just seen that, listening to Mr. Londt. The government of national unity, unbelievable. The DA ministers are simply the best. Now, the fact of the matter that you've got a good media strategy or a media team doesn't mean your ministers are the best, with all due respect. But that's the kind of underlying arrogance that we always see from the Democratic Alliance. If you look at what's happened in the Western Cape, and we are not governing with the ANC. If you look at the town, for example, like Oudtshoorn, the DA's got 7 members out of 25. That's 28%. There's no reason why the DA should take the lead. The ANC's got 7 as well. So what we've called for after the DA broke the coalition, one-sidedly so, and with all due respect, the DA shouldn't be so holier than thou, for the reality is this. When we discussed the budget in Oudtshoorn, the other 3 parties made very good proposals in terms of how we can save money for the residents in Oudtshoorn. What was the response of that Superman mayor of theirs that they are so very supportive of? His reply was, this is my budget and I'm not listening to small parties. The DA is not that big. They've got 28% in Oudtshoorn and we've got 12%. He then went and he made a deal with the ANC. He broke the coalition agreement at that very moment and he pushed his budget through. There's no coalition then after that has happened. That's a breach of trust. They did exactly the same in Langeberg. So the fact of the matter is there are approximately 8 other coalition governments in the Western Cape. And we are part and parcel of that. We are committed to make that work. And for the sake of stability and good service delivery and this nonsense that only the DA can govern, with all due respect, I can show you things going wrong in the Western Cape. You won't believe it. Let's take Drakenstein, for example. The DA is not in a coalition in Drakenstein. They are governing there with a clear majority. Their mayor was removed. By whom? By half of their own caucus who rebelled against their mayor. So there are lots of problems with the Democratic Alliance, with all due respect. What we think is necessary, and that's going to play out in 2026, we will have many of what I would call local governments of unity, which will bring stability, which will bring service delivery to in the best interest of the electorate. But then Mr. Londt now goes along and uses all kinds of statistics about elections, which are wrong, but that's nothing strange about the Democratic Alliance. They don't mind to use wrong statistics. They do that quite often. You see, the problem with the Democratic Alliance is this. The Democratic Alliance does not believe in coalition governments, and they should be honest about that. They prefer to govern alone. Only they know the best for everybody else. So when they go into a coalition, their approach is the following. We need your votes from time to time. Then you should give your votes. But for the rest, we don't want to hear from you. We don't want to see you. Just keep quiet and give us your vote from time to time. That's what Mozilla has done recently when she puts the whole government of national unity at jeopardy. Everybody knows it's a government of national unity. She comes along and says, no, it's a coalition between the ANC and the DA. Why is she doing that? Because she wants to push all the other parties out of the government of national unity, strangle them. And then she clearly says in the end, the DA wants to defeat the ANC, and then a miracle is going to happen. Everybody is going to become members of the Democratic Alliance. That is the kind of folly that the DA believes in. Now, the DA has got a choice. They can man up and do what is necessary in terms of fulfilling a role of a responsible coalition partner. And the irony is this. The larger party in the coalition should be the most mature because you've got most to lose, like you've just lost in Oudtshoorn. We invited you to become part of a government of national unity. You declined. You wanted to become the opposition, and in that instance, you are now in exactly the same position as MK and the EFF on national level. You can make a lot of noise. You've got no input into governance. You've now done exactly the same in Langeberg, and the irony is this. They now complain about a vote on the budget. Once again, not prepared to listen to the proposals and stuff from the opposition and from the other coalition parties. Something that happened on the 30th of May. Listen to the date, the 30th of May. Nothing happened until the 7th of August. 2 months later, suddenly the DA's got a huge problem, and suddenly now it's a breach of trust, and they break the coalition at Langeberg. It's got nothing to do with the 30th of May. It's got everything to do with the fact that they lost control in Oudtshoorn 10 days ago. It's unfortunate. I don't think the electorate wants to see this kind of conflict between political parties. The Freedom Front Plus will retain our position as the adult in the room. We extend a hand of friendship to the Democratic Alliance, but then they must try to understand what coalitions are really about.
All right. Gentlemen, I'd like for us to take a pause. Just joining us, we are discussing the relationship between the Freedom Front Plus and the Democratic Alliance, specifically in the Western Cape. A number of municipalities there could be in trouble if this relationship falls apart. Still with me for this discussion is Freedom Front Plus Western Cape leader, Dr. Corne Mulder, and representing the Democratic Alliance, the provincial head is Jaco Londt. Let me come to you, Mr. Londt. The accusation is quite simply this, that the Democratic Alliance is arrogant, and at the best of times, you think that you are the best thing since sliced bread, and we are being pointed to a Drakenstein as being in a messy state. And so where does this notion come in that where the Democratic Alliance governs, it's a land of milk and honey, when in fact your people at Drakenstein, they all by themselves, but that particular region is in a mess? How do you respond to that?
So, Polly, firstly, I do want to just point out something. It's something that the opposition likes to throw out. Yes, we do brag when we do well, and we are proud where we are in government and we do well. And I did not say our ministers are the best, the ministers in the government of national unity. But I am saying that we are incredibly proud of what they have achieved over such a short period of time. And that healthy competition that they are going to create with the other ministers. And unlike Dr. Mulder, I met with his federal leader the other day, who had a much healthier approach to working together. And unlike the Western Cape Freedom Front, who aligned themselves with something like Cape Exit, we actually believe in South Africa. We believe in Project South Africa. We don't just believe focusing here, we're doing our bit to change the country. And yes, we are not perfect. Not once have we said we are perfect, and we make mistakes and we correct those mistakes. But what I can say is that I'm incredibly proud of our men and women that are in government, that do their best to set a benchmark that the rest of the country can follow. And Dr. Mulder said I lied about the stats, which is a very dangerous thing to see. But I challenge every viewer to go and look at the Freedom Front results in this election and previous elections. They are dying in this province, And that is why they are attacking the only working party that's working
You don't
with
attack
others.
anyone.
Freedom
That's
Front is
not
not
true.
trying.
Dr. Mulder, let's allow
Dr.
him
Mulder?
time. Let's allow him time to finish.
So
Please
under
continue.
Dr. Mulder's leadership, the Western Cape Freedom Front aligned with the Cape Exit. They do not believe in Project South Africa. We do. We work with all other parties where we can and when we have worked with the Freedom Front. But ever since they got this thrashing at the polls, they started attacking our governments. They made it about the personalities of the individuals. And like I said right at the beginning, we do not prescribe to the Freedom Front who to put forward. But then they want to come and prescribe to us who we must put forward. And that is the double talk that just doesn't hold up. So, Corley, we are proud of where we govern. We do make mistakes at times, and we need to improve on that. It's not just milk and honey. There's areas that needs improvement, and we must strive to be better. But my concern is that we will be continuously attacked now, and we will have more municipalities that fall by the wayside. And then those municipalities will fall in the hands of the Freedom Front ANC coalition, like it did now in Oudtshoorn. And then we will see what happened in Knysna. We will happen what we saw in Bito, what happened in Beaufort before we took over now. That's the risk. And we need to prevent that. And the Freedom Front Plus need to put the knock they got this election behind them. Please come to the table. They claim to be the adult in the room, but their toys are all over this show. And make sure that we fix this up until 2026 and let the voters then judge each and one of us at the polls as a democracy works.
All right. Dr. Mulder, I'd like for you to respond to this particular statement. And you tell me if you are being completely honest with your coalition partner, the Democratic Alliance. This is the ANC Western Cape spokesperson, Khalid Said, who is quoted in a News 24 article as saying, and I quote, "The Freedom Front Plus thus far has proven to be an honest partner. They have proven to have the residents of these municipalities at heart. And like ourselves, they believe in the spirit of a government of national unity." And this is translating, this is the important part, this is translating into a government of local unity based on principles that are for the betterment and will continue with talks with them. Are you genuinely in some kind of an agreement with the ANC? Let's spell it out.
The fact, what the spokesperson of the ANC is saying there is there's nothing wrong with what he's basically just now said. He will also tell you that they've reached out to the Democratic Alliance and they invited the Democratic Alliance for talks to try and stabilize unstable municipalities in the Western Cape and to enhance service delivery. They also invited the Democratic Alliance. The Democratic Alliance is not saying anything about that and they hope that that will go away. So that is the position from the ANC. Nobody can prescribe to the ANC what their strategy should be. They believe that governments of local unity could be a solution to some of the unstable coalitions in the Western Cape. That is their stance. Obviously, after Oudtshoorn collapsed and after we invited the Democratic Alliance on 3 occasions and they declined, a government of local unity was formed and the ANC is part of that government of national unity, local unity. Now, once again, the strategy of the Democratic Alliance is very clear. They are going to collapse all the coalitions in the Western Cape, one after the other. They will find false reasons like they did in Langeberg. You've just heard Mr. Londt. It's amazing. It's not strange that people find the Democratic Alliance so absolutely arrogant because they continue to spur these lies one after the other, trying to put a narrative out there of the Freedom Front Plus, the evil Freedom Front Plus, who did that in the other. The Freedom Front Plus did not do that badly in the Western Cape, without all due respect, Mr. Londt. The Democratic Alliance did nothing. As if you look at the result of the Democratic Alliance in this election, when the ANC was at its weakest, you gained about 1% nationally, despite the fact that the ANC was at its weakest. It was not the Democratic Alliance that forced the ANC below 50 or 40%. It was MK. The DA had nothing to do with that, so there's nothing to be proud of. The fact of the matter is that the ANC has got their own strategy, and the DA will not succeed in trying to push a wedge between the leadership of the Freedom Front Plus. That's their other strategy. You just heard Mr. Londt. They've got a good relationship with the national leader, but the Western Cape is a problem. That's their strategy. You will not succeed in driving a wedge. The Freedom Front Plus is a united party in terms of our strategy and our leadership. But the problem is this. If we succeed in bringing governments of local unity throughout South Africa, it pulls the rug from underneath the Democratic Alliance, and it pulls the rug from underneath their strategy, telling the people only the DA can govern in South Africa in a very nice manner. It's only the DA. I don't accept that. It's not only the DA. Other people can govern as well. It is very, very presumptuous from the Democratic Alliance to put that kind of notion on the table.
All right.
But I'm not surprised. They will continue to do so. We will continue to be the adult in the room. We once again extend the hand of friendship to the Democratic Alliance. And please don't try to put this false, lying narrative on the table that the Freedom Front Plus and the ANC is now a problem. But the DA's got no problem to serve with the ANC in the government of national unity. But on local level, where the DA wants to be in charge, it seems to be a problem. Please try to be honest.
Mr. Londt, and that's the point I'd like to pick up on, because all of this argument, yes, it's happening at local government level, but there is a partnership at national level, and you used the word pathetic as the argument by the Freedom Front Plus when they put to you that you are in an agreement with the ANC at national level, but you are saying that that's a pathetic way of arguing when they are going to try and mirror what is happening at national level to what is happening at local level, because the ANC has been an utter failure. How do you think South Africans are digesting this, what you are saying now, to say at local level, we don't want the ANC. If anything, they should stay away. But at national level, we're okay, because I suppose we can show them up through our ministers.
So maybe I should not have used the word pathetic, and that I will withdraw as we are allowed sometimes in Parliament. But it is an argument that doesn't hold water. I mean, nationally, there was a choice between Mkhonto Sizwe and the EFF and the Democratic Alliance and others. Locally, in the Western Cape, the Freedom Front are faced with a choice of having DA municipalities DA governments that have a strong, proven track record in delivery. And that's not just us that's saying it. That's independent assessment. Ratings Africa, Good Governance Africa, the Auditor General. Those are independent institutions that say we govern on a whole better. And the Freedom Front Plus say there's unstable coalitions. The only instability is caused by the Freedom Front Plus now, where they were breaking up these coalitions. They say they are a united party. They ran with Cape Exit stickers on their posters when the rest of the country didn't want to do it. They lost a third of the parliamentary seats. We gained seats. So Corne Mulder is in a corner and is now destabilizing municipalities in the Western Cape for his and his party's gain. And we are risking that this will then go to the ANC. The ANC lost. They dropped to below 20%. Voters in this province has rejected the ANC completely. But the Freedom Front now wants to keep them alive in the Western Cape. And you can't be selective and on the one hand hold up the one argument and on the other hand hold up another argument. We had stable governments. And the Freedom Front is the one that's breaking up those stable governments now.
All right.
We want those governments to be stable up until 2026. And we will not prescribe to the Freedom Front who they must put as candidates to the voters. And the same way, they cannot prescribe to us who we must have as candidates to the voters. I mean, that's a simple argument. And that's what the Freedom Front don't want to acknowledge. They wanted to go in and they wanted to make this a personality thing, when in fact it's much more. They were annihilated in this election in the Western Cape.
No, we were not.
And Dr. Mulder is now on the offensive to try and salvage what the Freedom Front has done under his leadership. Okay. And they are risking municipalities, they are risking service delivery, and he can put that argument whichever way forward. But there's 10 a third of the municipalities in the Western Cape that's now being put at risk by one party and one party only, and that is the Freedom
That's the
Front.
DA. That's the
And
DA.
if it
No, that's the
helps,
DA.
if it helps to have these coalitions going forward, to have the conversation with the National Freedom Front, maybe we can salvage these municipalities, because it does not look like the Western Cape Freedom Front is willing to look after
If
the
you want-
Western Cape interest.
All right,
If you want
gentlemen,
to salvage,
gentlemen,
if you
Dr.
want to
Mulder,
salvage these coalitions, take away Helen Zille. That's where you should start.
Dr.
Take
Mulder.
away Helen Zille and we can salvage these things. But she's on a wrecking ball exercise to defeat all these things. And it's quite clear, two things. The party that is breaking these coalition agreements at the moment is not the Freedom Front Plus, it's the DA. That's the first point. The facts are out there. You've done that on Wednesday last week again in Langeberg. Secondly, it's quite clear that the Democratic Alliance has identified a strategy to come for me as the leader in the province. Good luck with that.
All right.
If you want to solve these things, get rid of your national chair, then we can succeed. But she's the problem. She wants to defeat the government of national unity. She wants to do the same in these coalitions because she and the rest of your party believes it's the DA or nothing else.
And I suppose as we conclude this conversation, the question is this the right way to start the 2026 local government campaign? Mr. Londt, I'm going to throw that question to you, that if this is the way that the 2026 local government campaign is going to start, surely it's not going to be good on either side. You've just heard Dr. Mulder. He says that your national chairperson, Helen Zille, is a wrecking ball and she needs to be gotten rid of if these arrangements are going to work. And I suspect he's talking both at national and local level.
So, Corley, I said right at the beginning that we did not make this about personalities. Not in Oudtshoorn, not in Langeberg, nowhere. But as you can hear, and as the listeners heard, they called our mayor the Superman mayor in Oudtshoorn, and they said he was the problem. Later on, the argument now changed and said Helen was the problem. The fact of the matter is, it's the Western Cape Freedom Front. They got a massive knock. And now they are using different arguments for different municipalities to bring instability. But one thing that's quite interesting, this election that was just passed, not a single party in the Western Cape wanted the Western Cape to win with an outright majority. Not one. You can go back, the Freedom Front attacked us, the PA attacked us, the ANC, Action SA, Rise Mzansi, every single party attacked the DA because they do know that when we get into government, we tend to govern better. And when we are in government, it is more difficult for them to have a foothold. So it is advantageous for a party like the Freedom Front, where there were stable governments. And the only reason, and he can spin it whichever way he will, and he's an old hand in the politics, he's an old hand in the politics. He can spin it whichever way. These governments were stable until the Freedom Front rocked the boat. And your question is, do we want it to be stable? Unequivocally, yes. Because when there's instability, it puts service delivery on the back foot. And when there's instability, it makes it more difficult to be on the front foot and go outward facing, because you need to look over your shoulder all the time.
All right.
And unfortunately, we are now looking over our shoulder in a third of the municipalities in the Western Cape, because a coalition partner that claims to be the adults in the room, that claims to be a reliable and trustworthy coalition partner, has proven that they are not. And we've got the voice recordings and the messages and everything. And just on one thing, yes, the ANC has reached out to the DA. And no, we are not going to coalition with them. Okay, that's a no. So there's only one party that goes into coalition in the Western Cape, and that's the Freedom Front.
Mr. Mulder, are those words reassuring? And surely this is a bad start to the 2026 campaign, because you are going to upset the residents.
No, it is a very bad start for the 2026 campaign, but with all due respect, as far as I'm concerned, it's absolutely clear what the DA strategy is. The DA strategy is exactly what is being playing out. Mr. Londt says we shouldn't make it about personalities. His whole contribution tonight was focused on me as the leader of the party in the Western Cape. I'm supposed to be the problem. I'm the reason why the Western Cape this, that, and the other. With all due respect, you can't say on the one hand, don't make it about personalities, and then you frame me and try to attack me. It will not go down very well. Secondly, if there was absolute stability in George, we were governing there with the Democratic Alliance. They unilaterally broke the coalition agreement. There was absolute stability in the Garden Route District Council. The Democratic Alliance once again broke the coalition agreement. There was stability in Oudtshoorn, but the mayor there decides that he's not going to listen to the other coalition parties, not only the Freedom Front Plus, also to others, ICOSA and Saamstaan. And if he doesn't agree with us, he then went over to the ANC. The DA now wants to create the impression that they don't want to have anything to do with the ANC. That is a blatant lie. They shouldn't do that. The Democratic Alliance went along in Oudtshoorn. They made a deal with the ANC to vote for their budget. They did exactly the same in Langeberg.
Right.
So with all due respect, they shouldn't create this impression that they are holier than thou. They don't want to have anything to do with the ANC. It's simply not true. And then the amazing thing is this narrative being pushed, which is a blatant lie, that the Freedom Front Plus is now the bad guys. We are now breaking all the coalitions. We haven't broken one single coalition in the Western Cape. The Democratic Alliance is walking away from coalitions. They did it on Wednesday. I was in the meeting. We explained to the DA, we've got no problem with the DA. We want to continue with the coalition. They decided to terminate the coalition. We didn't say that. We didn't do that. We said exactly the opposite. And that is why we will go to the people of Langeberg on Wednesday evening and we'll ask them for a mandate and then we will implement that mandate. But with all due respect, if you ask about the election campaigns, the DA has already started the election campaign. They don't want to be in coalitions. They want to strangle all the other parties, try to create some impression that they're all bad people and how dare you cooperate with these other parties? But the same DA is very happily married in the government of national unity and then have to withdraw the words pathetic. But the underlying problem here is the DA does not believe in coalitions and they should just simply come out and say so. If you look, for example, as I've said in Oudtshoorn, no party had a clear mandate. It's a lie to say that we had a choice of a good governing Democratic Alliance. The Democratic Alliance in Oudtshoorn has got 7 seats out of 25. Who gives them the right to govern in Oudtshoorn? There's no right for them to govern.
Dr. Mulder.
So if they don't want to operate, then obviously there's a problem. I'm optimistic about the coming election in 2 years' time. The Freedom Front Plus will grow. We will do the right thing for South Africa and the Western Cape. There's a very good argument for collective governance in coalitions.
Dr.
I'm
Mulder,
always skeptical about any party says only us.
Dr. Mulder,
apology.
I want to thank you very much for your time and contribution tonight. Jaco Londt, thank you very much for your time and contribution as well. And thank you. All right, this is where we end this conversation. And up next, Thabo Mdluli with In Focus. Thank you for watching.